Hey guys, welcome back from Thanksgiving break. So it finally happened. It got cold out here in South Carolina, and it's been below freezing at night consistently for multiple days in a row now. And it's been far enough below freezing that we have actually seen the death of the garden. And I've been waiting for this. It has been long past time. But now that my garden is dead, I have a whole new set of tasks, because here in South Carolina, our winters are mild enough that the freeze doesn't mean that the gardening season is entirely over. It just means that everything that is going on in the garden is just drastically shifting. You can see this row especially, how dead it looks, and there's even still like little remnants of green back there in the peppers, but they're definitely all frost damaged to death, and it's just taking a while for those dead leaves to actually dry out. We can look at the eggplant here and see these are done. They are not going to be doing anything else this year. And now we can finally see my cute little lavender here. It's finally going to start getting some sun, so that'll be probably very good for it. But we do have a lot of stuff in the garden, and over the break I actually did get some work done that I've been talking about doing, so we'll go over some of that. Let's take a look at my entry little trellis here. I've had scarlet runner beans on this all year, and you can see it finally got cold enough for them to die back. But these are a perennial bean, and they should come back from the roots next year. I guess time will tell, because I haven't actually grown these before, but I think that they should come back. We also have some turmeric here. I had 2 turmeric plants here, and I am thinking that I will be able to overwinter turmeric in the ground here with enough mulch. So I harvested some of my turmeric, and I'm going to try overwintering some of it as well with this like massive bed of straw around it, and just kind of see how that goes. And if we walk up here and look at the old tomato trellis, you can see I've actually cleared it off. Essentially what I did was I dumped it all in the ground. I walked through and just spent like an hour or so just casually yanking stuff off of here and just literally throwing it on the ground and kind of like, you know, tamping it down a little bit. It is free mulch as far as I'm concerned, and at this point I'm kind of feeling like, why would I drag this all to the compost pile just to drag it all back in the spring? It might as well do its thing right here. And there's probably I'll do some of that with some of this bigger detritus here as well. This second row I'm going to try and clear out as little as possible, but I'm still going to try and make sure that I make room for anything that is going to be coming up and growing over the winter. Which leads me to the first thing that I did while you guys were on break, while I was on break. Right under this whole trellis I have planted garlic, and this is a classic spot for me to plant garlic, because garlic will grow from now all the way through to the midsummer, and I will be planting tomatoes here again before the garlic is ready to harvest, and having it like directly under the trellis with the distance this is up off the ground, it doesn't really get in the way of the trellis doesn't get in its way, and when I plant the tomatoes I'll plant them like offset from the trellis on either side. That gives them more room for their roots and makes it easier for me to plant more tomatoes on the same trellis, because their roots aren't quite as close than if I was planting them directly underneath the trellis. But also that means that by the time the garlic is big enough to harvest, the tomatoes haven't necessarily gotten big enough to start shading it out. So we'll be looking at kind of sharing the space for a little while, and I've done this many years in a row now, and I find it to be quite efficient. This year I wanted to plant 100 cloves of garlic, and so I did do a bunch of them underneath here, but then I also had maybe about 50 more, and those went in this row. And if you look at this, I know it's like very overgrown and jungly, and there should be a pathway here, but there's not. But this is like about the center of this row, and so I did more garlic going up the center here, and that's kind of the same principle. I will put, you know, whatever else is going to end up going here, and the garlic will be like minimally in the way while all that other stuff is like baby transplants trying to get itself started over here. Also in this general area, I planted out my perennial onions. You can see the top of one of them right here. This is a potato onion. It is a, oh, what do they call it? Cluster onion, maybe? Basically, it will keep dividing every year, and then you pull it and you put one of the divisions back in the ground. It would be like if you harvested a head of garlic and then immediately took one of the cloves and stuck it back in the ground. It's gonna be kind of like that. Now that it is colder, my little patch of volunteer lettuce is gonna be much, much sweeter, and it's actually growing pretty fast. I have been harvesting off of this and you can't even really tell. It's still very fluffy, and I could probably harvest even more off of this because they're planted so close together, because I didn't thin them after they all volunteered. They are not ever really going to be able to compete with each other enough to get very big, so I might as well harvest baby grains from these, and as long as I keep them small, they're not competing with each other very much. Now, again, now that stuff has died, we do have more room for some of the other stuff that I have put in here. This is, I think, it's either a cabbage or a Brussels sprout, and we've got another brassica of some kind over here. I put just a couple of them in here from my little tray of them that were really stunted. And something interesting that I'm seeing is these ones that are in the ground are doing so much better than the ones that I put in that raised bed. And we'll go over and see that in a minute. But basically, it's confirming to me that the soil in that raised bed is still part of the problem, because these were planted out like multiple weeks later than the ones in the raised bed, and from the same size seedlings. And these ones are just doing fantastically better than the ones over there, because they have access to, I guess, proper nutrients here in the ground and are not dealing with whatever it was in that soil that has made everything I put in it be dinky and sad. As we keep going along here, you can see better up close the death of the hot pepper plants. These guys stuck it out for so long. Like, I had recorded temperatures below freezing on my weather station and they still hadn't died. So they were doing really well in the colder evenings for quite a while. It took a lot to finally knock them out, but now that they are knocked out, again, they've created this open area for sun to get down to the soil, and anything that I plant here is going to actually just be able to get plenty of sunlight now. Another good reason to leave your dead stems, aside from just not having to do the work of dragging them back and forth for compost, is that these stems, these dried out stems, a lot of beneficial insects will actually nest in there over the winter. And if you're removing all of their nesting spots, you're going to have fewer of those beneficial insects the next year that everything comes around. So it feels like a win-win all around. Less work for you, more habitat for the beneficials. And if you want to learn more about all the different roles of insects in your garden and what exactly is considered beneficial, then go check out the video that I just released on insects in your garden. It is just all about all the different types of insects, all the different roles, and how their presence or lack of their presence can communicate things to you about how your garden is actually doing. Coming to the end of the row here, we have a good example of what I mean about the free mulch. These are corn stalks that I took down, and I just laid them in the path, and they've been doing a great job mulching this particular spot, and I didn't have to drag them anywhere. I just had to lay them down. Very easy, very convenient. And this is right next to my largest rutabaga. It is right here, doing pretty good. We've got some lettuces kind of mixed in here and quite a bit of dill coming up. There is, I think, 1 or 2 spinaches in there. It's all densely planted because I took some seeds in a literal empty spice bottle and shook them on the soil and was like, whatever lives, lives. And that's what we ended up with. And it's still definitely harvestable. I have more dill than I think I know what to do with, or I will once it actually starts getting bigger. It took me actually forever to learn that dill will do well in the post-frost world. It was like, oh, just plant it with the summer herbs. But I mean, you start thinking, oh, it looks like carrots. It's kind of like generally related to all of that stuff, and it does take the frosts pretty well. You can also just see how well the cabbages over here are doing. They look incredible. The one that was sad, that was getting attacked by bugs, it's still looking very sad. But it is no longer being attacked by bugs after multiple treatments of organic Rev, which is just a beneficial microbe solution that you can get. It is still stunted and not doing great, but at least it is not festering aphids. And this one next to it also seems to have gotten pretty affected by them. You can kind of see some of the remnants on the back of that leaf there. But everything else seems to be doing fine. And again, I like to point out that this is showing that it is the health of the plant that has to do with whether or not it gets affected by these diseases, pests and diseases. But I mean, these two plants were pretty heavily affected, right? But then you can look right next to it and see that these plants have no damage from that at all and are looking super healthy. And it's probably just because something happened with these two plants where they just didn't end up having the immune system to deal with the pests that were coming their way. Right in between some of these brassicas, I have planted out some of the onions that I had stored for the year that had started sprouting. I was like, oh, they're sprouted, and some of them were pretty far along. I was like, I might as well put these in the ground and get some onion greens off of them. And also those bulbs will split, and I can harvest them again as like edible onions if I want. They will also flower eventually in the summer if I leave them, and that is a good way for me to go ahead and get seeds. The blue butterfly peas have also finally bit the dust. They definitely stuck it out a lot longer than I expected, and I really need to come through here and grab as many of these seed pods as I can and hope that enough of them were actually mature, because I've just struggled to get mature seeds off of this plant. And I'll buy them again if I have to, but I really would like to not have to. Our friends, the volunteer brassicas here in the middle of the path, are continuing to look pretty nice. Nothing really affecting them. They're just a little close together for how big I think they're going to be. But they all look pretty healthy, and I'm thinking more and more that these might be broccoli of some kind, just based on the number of broccolis that I've seen and the shape and the texture of the leaves. But honestly, all brassicas look so similar, it'll be really hard to tell until they start reaching kind of a mature size. Along this back row here, I don't have too much going on. It looks like I have a pea going on. I don't really remember planting that there, but there it is. I've got some more of those onions that had started to sprout. This looks like actually garlic that I forgot to harvest. And it looks like it has split, and you know, it was a head of garlic, right? And then each individual clove has now sprouted again, which is why it looks like this bunch of grass. But I've seen enough grass next to garlic to know that this is almost certainly garlic. And I haven't done as much of accidental planting of garlic to see what'll happen, and I love just letting things go and seeing what'll happen. So I'll leave this, and we'll find out together when I harvest it what happens when you forget your garlic in the ground like that. If we walk farther down over here, you can see I've got some more of these like mustard plants and a couple more dill coming up in between all the weeds that are here. I have another onion that got left in the ground, and this one I know was left because it's yellow and not red like the ones that I all pulled in this year. There's another one right there. You can see just how much greens are coming out of it. But this area is also where I put more of my perennial onions. I put some of my Egyptian walking onions back in this area, and also some of the potato onions, just because this back area, I don't come here very much, and it's a good spot to just dedicate to a perennial that'll kind of take it over. You might have also noticed I have new logs in the garden. These are new mushroom logs that I have inoculated. I have a couple more over here hidden behind the straw. I have mostly shiitake and chestnut mushrooms in these logs, and like the previous ones, it'll be probably about a year or more until we start seeing any sort of fruiting from these. It'll take a long time for them to get kind of colonized with all the mycelium, but when they do, and then when it becomes the correct temperature after they're properly colonized, that's when they start to fruit. And I'm thinking one of the mistakes that I might have made with the original ones is not watering them enough as they're getting colonized. We went through a drought this last year, and I wasn't really watering the garden through the drought, only just like little bits as far as it like needed it to survive. And these logs definitely didn't get as wet as they could have been, and probably it slowed down the colonization process. So I'm going to try and do a better job of keeping these logs at the proper wetness while they're colonizing, and that'll be a little easier, at least over the winter, because it should be a lot wetter, and then hopefully we will not have another drought next summer. Alright, as we come over into the raised bed section of the garden, there is some updates on these little perennials here. My hardy kiwi also finally lost its leaves to the frost, and it has had a good amount of time to get established here, so I'm not too worried about it. I think I will probably bring some of the straw mulch in over here and like kind of cover it up to keep it just a little bit warmer over the winter. Additionally, the grapes the grapes have lost their leaves, and this is expected. They will lose their leaves and then come back in the spring. Well, one would hope. I haven't actually seen it for myself, but that is the way it is supposed to work. So currently we are not worried about this. This is just part of the plant shutting down, going into dormancy for the winter. And as the cold temperatures continue to persist, we'll see a lot of nothing in this area as far as like big changes, especially with like perennial herbs and everything. You'll see I do have more logs out over here. I'm trying different positionings to see if that helps with the fruiting at all. But mostly the stuff that you see that's green here now will just continue to be green over the winter. We've got the yarrow here. The asparagus should kind of die back a little bit more as the winter progresses. I've got a couple of annuals over here, mostly the carrots, and these are now at a point where I can start pulling them out and using them in recipes. Some of them are still a little small. I pulled one the other day and it was looking pretty good, but it was kind of short. So I think they still have like a little bit of growing that they could be doing, but also it's okay to pull them small. You're just, not getting as big of carrots as you could. They'll still be wonderful and tasty and perfectly edible. And actually what I did is I put them in a stir fry, and then I actually chopped up all the greens and wilted them into the stir fry at the last second, and they basically disappeared into it. It's like free nutrition. Carrot greens, I know some people like them. I think they're only okay, but if I can make them melt into something where I don't have to notice them, then I don't mind adding the extra bit of green for prettiness, and of course the nutritional value of them and the feeling of not wasting that. Another thing I did over the break is I came in through and harvested my Jerusalem artichokes, aka sunchokes, and these are the stems right here. I really wasn't expecting to get much because these guys did not look like they were doing very good over the course of the year. Like I said, it was a drought. I didn't pay good attention. The soil was also part of the stuff that was kind of screwed up, and I was like, well, they'll survive. And the reason I dug them up at all was because I was like, I'll like break them apart and spread them out so that next year they're not all like growing in one spot. And when I pulled them out, I was like, wow, this is actually a really appreciable harvest. I'll show you what all I got, and that is post taking some to plant back in the ground. So I can see why people say that this is like super prolific and really low maintenance. Like this thing went through a drought and it's still like overproduced for me. So I can only imagine what I'm going to be getting next year. This is the little raised bed that I mentioned earlier, where I think it's super obvious that the soil is still part of the problem, even though I've added more good soil on top. And you can see also it's been dug in by the cats. That's not helping it out at all. But, you can kind of see that these were put out, like I said, multiple weeks before the other ones. And yeah, they're not dead, but they're still small and they're not taking off the way that I would have expected them to, especially with all the warm weather that we had. these had like almost an entire month of really mild temperatures, and they're still just little. So it's kind of disappointing. And even the radishes, which are supposed to be easy and fast growing, they're just kind of like barely making it. And I'm starting to wonder if I might have to do more intense rehabilitation on the soil, or maybe I just need to like get a lot of better soil and fill it all the way up. I might also try something like planting sunflowers in here over the summer, because sunflowers are known for like pulling nasty stuff out of the soil and helping to remediate it. We'll see if I actually try that, or if I try and bypass that by just filling it up with more soil. Stay tuned. You'll learn a lesson, and you won't have to go through the failure like I do. But I mean, we might get something. I don't know. We'll leave these here for the winter. Maybe they'll just grow really slow. Maybe they won't grow at all. We'll find out. Another raised bed I've been disappointed with is this one. I mean, look at all that death. Like, I don't know if y'all remember how fluffy it was before the aphids hit. And then every single brassica, the turnips, and the rutabagas, just, they got hit so hard. Luckily, it seems like the beets were not edible by the aphids, and the carrots also seem to be doing okay. These are younger carrots than the other ones that y'all saw. And it looks like they will be fine, you know? And I think part of it, again, is the soil. Just these plants were not able to access enough nutrients to keep themselves healthy enough that when the pest arrived, it found easy pickings, you know? And it's really sad, because I was really excited about my rutabagas and my turnips for a second. But I've still got a few beets. I'm going to have to learn how to eat beets now. I planted them because they're supposed to be the sweetest kind of beet you can grow. They're a white beet, and they're supposed to be super good. I roasted one the other day that still tastes like beet, in my opinion. Maybe like a milder beet, which is essentially dirt flavored. But I did have beets served to me at a restaurant not that long ago, and they were excellent. So I know it's possible. I'll just have to figure out how to do it. We also need to take a look at the changing berry patch. I have straw mulched pretty much all of this. This bare section right here is the St. John's wort, and I even mulched like straight over all of the strawberries because it'll help protect them, and they should be able to push up through it in the spring. The blackberries and the raspberries still have quite a bit of green on them, and you can actually see I've got some ripe fruits here that are actually not damaged by the frost, although the frost will start telling this plant to slow down, shut down for the winter. They're not necessarily like strictly frost tender plants. So getting my raspberries. I also haven't shown you guys in a while this little area where I have my elderberry and my little baby fig cutting. You can see the frost finally got to the fig. Its singular leaf is dead, but it's got a little bud. It is ready for spring. And what I've done here is I've mulched with those free wood chips that I get, and then I mixed some of the chicken manure that I get from my neighbors in with this, and it's kind of fresh manure but also fresh wood chips. And I'm thinking that the mix of the browns and the greens will be really good like composting in place for these plants over the winter. I'm thinking it might also help keep the roots a little warmer if we've got like a warm compost situation going on top of them. The elderberry, it was doing really badly when I planted it, right? Like I thought the drought killed it, but it has been coming back, and the frost has not killed these little leaves yet. So far so good with the elderberry. Alright guys, that's all I have for you today. I will see you next week for another garden tour, and until then I wish you all happy gardening.